Abstract image of an eye. Am I crazy? Am I blind? Should I be hard or should I be kind as I stand and shake my head? For no one knows what I see, yet I am always there to please. Colours wash over the screen.
They're not real, or they're more real, should I say, than maybe a sighted person can imagine. And you probably do without realising, but you can feel when things are there, even if you're not touching them. You learn, as someone who can't see at all, to rely on that feeling. It's, you know, it saves you. And these hallucinations are so real. Yes, you can see them, but you also feel them.
Aspectum. I'm Miles. I'm at the empty cricket stadium.
Started playing county and then started playing international England cricket from '98 through to 2008. So a lot of really good fun. Got to see places around the world that I wouldn't have been able to see had I been able to see through just playing cricket, the sport that I've loved since I was as far back as I can remember, with my dad when I was 5 years old. Sat on the sofa with him explaining fielding positions. When I was 18 months old, my mum noticed that the pupil in my right eye wasn't working properly when she turned the lights on and off, and took me off down to the doctors. Then went straight down there and was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, so it's a cancer of the retina. It was in both eyes, but it was much further progressed in my right eye. So far so they had to remove that eye instantly, you know, straight away. They reckoned that sort of 5 weeks later the cancer would have been into the optic nerve and the brain, and that would have been it. You know, that would have been the end of stuff. Did radiotherapy on my left eye for the next 3 years. Some cobalt plaques on the back of the eyeball and all that sort of stuff to try and fry the cancer. But in the end, it didn't work. It was too resilient. So they took my left eye when I was 4.5.
I'm Nina. Developed a sight condition when I was 2 years old. I caught the flu virus and it attacked my eyes, left me with different problems. I lost my right eye 13 years ago in an accident at work, and then I lost the retina out of the left eye coming up to 4 years ago now, in an accident at home. That morning I was taking too much on, doing the payroll for the staff at the cafe. I was trying to get my son ready for school. I bent over, basically caught the corner of the TV, and it burst a hole in the top of my eyeball. And I knew straight away, the sight went just black. There was just like lines of lightning, and I knew that the sight had gone. It was quite frightening. I came around from surgery and I just saw waves of blue and red, and I thought, they've saved something that I can see something, they've saved some of my sight. Doctor came back and I remember these words. He said, I can reassure you, we haven't saved your sight, it's just your mind playing tricks on you. So those words kind of haunted me, because I thought, well, I can see something, there's something there for sure. Because he said that to me, I was really scared to tell anybody. Waves of blue, yellow and green wash over the screen. The images started to develop from that point, and I started seeing patterns and shapes, and the colours, the blue and red turned into green and yellow and pink and purple, and then they started forming shapes, and then they became faces, and the faces were kind of turned into like a skull, a zombie skull, and they had no eyes in the sockets and they had blood dripping down the cheeks. It just became too too scary. I was just sat there crying, kind of huddled on the sofa in the corner, just scared of these zombies that were there. And here's some artwork I made of the skulls.
We enter a doll's house recreation of my childhood home.
So I first started getting hallucinations when I was probably about 4. I think it was just before I'd totally lost my sight. Mine have always been what I've always called monsters. Ones that were good, ones that were friendly, ones that weren't. So I guess the friendly ones, they just sort of sat back. They were never a threat. There were 2 in particular I remember when I was young, and they were sort of snakes, and they were not friendly. They were as thick as your arm, and they had kind of thick, wormy hair. When you're a child, and your parents have gone out and your grandparents are sitting for the evening and you've gone to bed, sometimes as a child you'd wake up and go, oh, I want my mum, I want my dad, or whatever. I couldn't go to the door to call downstairs to my gran or my granddad or whatever, because as soon as I opened the door a crack, one or both of these snakes would be outside and they'd try and come through the door. So you might whip it open, shout, slam it and dive back into bed again, but you probably wouldn't. So you either just shouted a lot from there, or you bottled everything up and got under the duvet where you couldn't see, metaphorically speaking, because that works for me. If I'm seeing a monster, if I cover my eyes, I can't see it. Work that one out.
I walk through a mirror maze with my cane, reflections of myself appearing and disappearing. It does have an impact, and some days I feel like, God, I just can't carry on. I can't cope with this anymore. I need to close, I need to go away, I need to get away, I need to escape it, and I can't escape it. It's there, and I have them bad days. So for me, I experience them all day, every day. So from the moment I wake to the moment I get to sleep, or when I get to sleep, because that is one thing that I struggle with, getting to sleep, because when the hallucinations are there, they're there when I close my eyes. They don't go away. It drives me insane sometimes. I know it sounds, I probably shouldn't say this in front of everyone, but it sounds like some days, and especially it's more at night time when I'm trying to get to sleep, but I smack myself on the head, I shake, I lie there in bed crying, begging for it to go away because I just want to go to sleep. And that is really difficult to live with. And when you can't make it go away, that's hard. And then you get guilt and shame for whacking yourself on the head to try and make it go away. Because it can be so lonely. Nobody knows what I'm going through. No one can see what I see. I'm trying to explain it to people. You don't know if they're going to think you're crazy, or they're going to empathise, or you just don't know how they're going to react. And
I'm sitting in the garden with Nushka, my German Shepherd guide dog.
How do you tell someone? I don't know. I really don't know. It was just something that I lived with. It was just there. I told a friend of mine about them probably when I was about 6, 7, something like that. Not, I see these monsters. It was just, there are these monsters. And I suspect at that age he probably took it as a game. But also, I think he probably knew to a point there was something. Because he would ask, he'd say, what monsters are there today? Which ones are they? And let's get them, and we'd charge down the corridor, we'd attack these things, and it actually felt quite good. Just to actually be on the front foot felt good.
Reflections of images through water. From the moment I was told that it was just my mind and I saw those wavy colours, it was probably about 5 or 6 weeks that I kept it to myself, which doesn't seem that long, but for me it felt like months. And it got to the point where I can't do this alone anymore. I have to speak to somebody. But I was really scared of telling anyone because I thought, they're going to think I'm going mad. What do you mean you can see someone in the corner of the room? What do you mean you can see a crocodile crawling across the living room? Are you going crazy? You're mental. They're going to think that I'm having a nervous breakdown because I've lost my sight and I've lost my business and I've lost, stick me on a load of tablets and I'm just going to become a vegetable in the corner of the room. So I was really scared to tell anyone. So I told my mum and husband, and they didn't have a clue, but they were really understanding and they're, patient and, right, let's try and find out what's going on. And that's when I came across Judith Potts and Esme's umbrella. So I emailed her and explained what I was going through, and she replied and said, yeah, you've got Charles Bonnet Syndrome. And I was like, whoa, what's that? It just felt amazing that she's told me that I have this condition. It's got a name, like, wow. Even though I had no idea what it was, I had something that had a name and a partial explanation, so...
Back in the doll's house, a documentary is playing on TV. We hear from Judith Potts, Professor Maria Mussagy and Professor Dominic Fitch.
When you have full sight, there are messages which run all the time from the retina in the eye to the visual cortex in the brain. The eye acting like a camera and the brain interpreting what it is you're seeing. When sight diminishes, those messages slow down or stop entirely. But the brain doesn't. The brain doesn't kind of retire at that point. The brain, with nothing to interpret, fires up and creates its own images, which are the visual hallucinations.
These are purely visual hallucinations, and they're not linked to any kind of mental illness. Charles Bonnet Syndrome is a side effect of losing one's vision, and it manifests as visual hallucinations. If you could imagine, if you're looking at your surroundings and part of your eye isn't working properly and it can't see very well, it could be like a jigsaw. There are parts of the jigsaw with the pieces there, and then there are dark bits where the pieces aren't present. Your brain realizes that there are gaps in your vision, and it tries to fill those gaps with an image.
So Charles Bonnet Syndrome ranges from very simple types of hallucination. It could be just a colour blob or a line, to about 60% of people who will describe a disembodied face, and it's often distorted in some way. And so people will describe it like a monster or a gargoyle or grotesque in some way. And then we get into sort of the rarer types. About a third of people will see actual text or a sentence written there, but when you try to read it, it doesn't make sense. And there's a variant of that with musical notation. We don't know what's special about that type of object, but that seems to be a typical Charles Bonnet Syndrome hallucination.
Waves of yellow, a white bird moving in the corner. So, they're here right now with me. I've got kind of yellow clouds, and there's a kind of like white little bird floating here at the side, and clouds are moving just gracefully. Yeah, I can't shift them. Yesterday I had a bit of a meltdown with my technology, and it wasn't doing what I needed it to do, and I was getting really stressed out with it. In that moment, that's when the zombie faces started appearing as well. Sometimes they've made me fall down the stairs or walk into doors because all of a sudden a tiger might just pop up in front of me, and it kind of takes me off guard.
You just don't know it, you don't think about it being a thing, being a recognised syndrome, which I think has made things a lot easier. I think it's my experience that in the 8 months since I've actually started talking about them, I don't think they're as intrusive, not as aggressive. They're still always there, and they still do have their times, but the times are currently less frequent. So maybe I won't say talking about them has cured them at all, because like I say, they're still there every time, just all the time they are there. but maybe it has in some way enabled me not to be so worried about them.
Shimmering animations of hallucinations play behind silhouettes of Miles and myself. To my Charles Bonnet Syndrome, I would just like to say welcome. Our journey has been a turbulent one, and I was unsure of which way it would go. I can now safely say you're a part of me, and I welcome all of you.
Dear monsters of Charles Bonnet Syndrome, since I was 5, you have intruded into my life without so much as a by your leave. When I was 4.5 and lost my sight, you lost not a second stepping into the void. In those days, you terrorised me with many forms.
When you first came into my life, you were a stranger, unknown. You appeared in a flourish of colour and a subtle wave. You were barely even there, but as you grew, so did my fear and loneliness.
The number of your forms decreased over the years, but none of you lost a moment or an opportunity to try and intimidate me and insinuate yourselves into my life. I finally found out what you are. And in the 8 months since then, I have begun to be able to do the hardest thing and tell people about you.
Then that moment came in a second when sat there alone that I am in control. I began to share and tell people more of you, and as I did, you became a part of me. I learnt about you, I found out who you were and why you existed.
Do you have any idea how hard it is to tell those that you love that you have been terrified out of your wits all your life and haven't been able to tell them? You bully and intimidate, and like bullies the world over, once you're exposed yourselves, you weaken, you diminish.
A breath, a moment, a thought, and I am in control again. There are the times we get along, and this is where you show your fun side, with bubbles, stars, and plenty of colour.
I own you. I'm going to tell as many people about you as I can, in the hope that less people have to spend their lives trapped inside their own heads with you.
I want to take what I've learnt from my life with you in the hope that it will teach others and help them.
In short, your days are numbered. You will be understood. And with understanding comes acceptance and ownership. And with acceptance and ownership comes freedom.
On that note, Charles Bonnet Syndrome, I thank you. I am not so scared anymore.
One in 5 people with sight loss experience some degree of Charles Bonnet Syndrome, with as many as 1 million in the UK alone. Executive producer Noel Irvin. Created by Jack Morris, James Edward Kilpatrick, Michael Reagan. Contributors Nina Chesworth, Miles Northwood, Judith Potts, Professor Maria Musacci, Professor Dominic Fitch. Music by Matt Peters. Drummer Jez Harrison. Engineer George Chung. Graphics Max Phillips. Dialogue mix Josh Bamford. Enhanced audio description, sound design and mix Professor Mariana Lopez, Professor Gavin Carney. Special thanks to Dave Inglis, John Bergen, Simon Shimmy-Valiski, Dr. Lee Jones, Matt Dunn, Scott Moyerden, Esme Umbrella.